Take the guest ledgers off the desk and start tagging the silver, Celeste said. We are opening the estate sale on Saturday. My grandfather's body was still in the chapel refrigerator when she said it, and the white sale sign was already stuck in the front garden under the hydrangeas he had pruned himself 3 weeks earlier. Then I saw my grandfather's office keys hanging from a red ribbon around her neck, and I knew she was not just selling furniture. She was looking for paper. I stood in the front hall of Bellhaven House and stared at her while my stepbrother Owen carried a stack of silver serving trays toward the dining room like we were preparing for brunch instead of a funeral. Bellhaven was an old coastal inn outside Newport, Oregon, all cedar walls, sea wind, and polished wood floors that remembered every pair of shoes that had ever crossed them. My grandfather had turned it into a bed and breakfast after retiring from marine insurance. My grandmother filled it with cardamom scones, ship logs, and blue tea tins labeled by season. Guests came back for the widow walk, the storm packages, and the feeling that the house itself knew how to listen. Then my grandmother died. My grandfather remarried Celeste 3 years later, and the whole place started sounding wrong. Politer, sharper, more arranged. Now my grandfather was gone too, and Celeste had put out a sale sign before we had even chosen funeral flowers. I looked from the red ribbon around her neck to the clipboard in her hand. You cannot be serious, I said. Celeste gave me that small, rehearsed smile she used whenever she wanted other people to confuse confidence with authority. The carrying costs on a property like this do not pause for mourning, she said. Harold understood that. You should too. Harold. She used his first name in front of other people whenever she wanted to perform intimacy. My grandfather used to call her that voice because even he could hear the switch when it happened. Owen came in through the side porch carrying another box. He stopped when he saw my face, then kept moving toward a folding table in the foyer labeled silver. The labels were written in neat black marker. Silver. China. Library. Decor. Guest rooms. Private contents sale. Family only. The sign in the garden had not been a bluff. I stepped farther into the hall. Where is the guest ledger? I said. Celeste's eyes flicked once toward the front desk, then back to me. Some records are being reviewed, she said. Lie. The heartbeat ledger had always sat open on the front desk, scanned every reservation, every package note, every winter storm retreat, every anniversary booking written in my grandfather's careful hand, or later in neat reception script. He called it the heartbeat book because if the rooms were breathing, the house was alive. Now the stand was empty. That was the part that truly tightened something in my chest. Not the silver. Not the china. The missing ledger. Because people who raid a house for grief trophies grab objects first. People who raid it for control grab the paper. I said nothing for a second. That was enough time for Celeste to mistake my silence for weakness. Good, she said. Then we understand each other. Stay out of the office, take whatever sentimental items you want from your old room, and let Owen help me with the practical work. Practical work. That was her favorite phrase for theft in daylight. I looked at the office keys again. Those are his office keys, I said. Celeste touched the ribbon lightly, almost unconsciously. The office has insurance files, vendor binders, and old guest nonsense. Someone has to keep things from disappearing. You mean someone has to get there first, I said. Her smile thinned. Do not start. That was the first real crack. Not because she raised her voice. Because for 1 second she forgot to sound gracious. I set my overnight bag beside the desk and walked past both of them toward the stairs. Owen shifted like he wanted to block me, then thought better of it. The West Hall rooms are being prepared for appraisal, Celeste called after me. I did not answer. My old room on the second floor still smelled faintly of cedar and lavender. Someone had opened the wardrobe and moved the quilt chest a few inches to the left. Search marks. Not random. Focused. The bedside drawer where my grandmother used to keep spare stationery sat half open, empty, except for one bent paperclip. I sat on the bed for the first time in months and pulled up the last text my grandfather had sent me. If anyone starts selling before the tea tins move, check the winter bookings file. At the time, 2 weeks earlier, I thought it was one of his morphine riddles. He had been drifting in and out of sleep and sending messages that sounded like weather reports with no key. Now it sounded like instruction. I work in revenue management for a boutique hotel group in Portland. Occupancy forecasting, reservation systems, vendor audits, licensing cross-checks, and all the quiet little math that tells you whether a property is running or pretending to. It teaches you a useful thing. Buildings lie when people tell them to. Paper lies less. Tea tins. Winter bookings file. I went straight to the old servants' pantry at the end of the hall. My grandmother kept imported teas there in blue ceramic tins, spring, summer, autumn, winter, Earl Grey, lapsang, chamomile, peppermint, all lined up in a row like she was cataloging comfort itself. Celeste did not drink tea. She drank lemon water and judgment. All 12 tins were still there, which meant the condition in the text mattered. If anyone starts selling before the tea tins move. She had moved too early. That meant panic. Panic meant leverage. I took the back stairs down to the kitchen, where Marta, the longtime cook, sat at the prep table, twisting a dish towel in both hands. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She started tagging the service pieces at 6 this morning, Marta whispered. She said the house cannot survive on memory. What moved first? I asked. Marta frowned, thinking. The front desk folders. Then the cellar wine ledger. Then she sent Owen to take down the old portrait in the hall. Then she called a locksmith for the office cabinet. Not the silver, not the china. The paper first. Exactly. Where is the winter bookings file, I said. Marta pointed toward the front desk. Archive drawer, unless she moved it. I checked the front desk myself. The archive drawer had been pulled open and rifled through, but the winter bookings file still sat there under catering invoices and old tax envelopes. Whoever searched it had looked quickly and badly. I carried it back upstairs and spread the pages across my bed. Reservation sheets, deposit notes, holiday package lists, kitchen pre-orders, storm weekend gift certificates. At the back, tucked into the clear sleeve pocket, I found a folded maintenance invoice from 6 months earlier. Custom millwork installation, library west wall, concealed service access, balance paid. Concealed service access, not a hospitality phrase, a hiding place phrase. I closed my eyes for a second and heard my grandfather's voice in my head, dry and patient the way he sounded when he wanted me to work something out instead of asking for the answer too quickly. Do not stop her too early. That was the feeling settling over everything now. There was already a trap. My job was not to build it from scratch. My job was to recognize it, then choose when to spring it. At 4 that afternoon, Celesta gathered 3 local dealers for what she called a private preview. Not a public sale, she told them, just discreet professional interest before formal estate administration. Which translated into, let me skim the best pieces before anyone with actual authority arrives. I watched from the upstairs landing as they drifted through Bellhaven, touching things they did not deserve. The library maps, the silver tea service, the brass room key rack, the grandfather clock. Each item another little confession. When Celeste led them into the dining room to admire the silver, I slipped into the library. The west wall held built-in shelves around the fireplace filled with ship logs, mystery novels, coastal charts, and binders of guest recipes. One lower shelf sat shallower than the others. I ran my fingers along the trim and found a spring catch under the molding. The panel opened inward. Inside was a weather-lined records cavity packed with flat folders. Title insurance, operating schedules, licensing renewals, trust instruments. A sealed envelope marked for opening only if Celeste attempts liquidation within 120 days. Another marked room ledger rider. I took everything to the reading table. The letter first. If Celeste starts selling before the winter inventory transition, do not stop her too early. Let her show you what she thinks matters. Then take these to Harriet Sloane before she lists the property. My grandfather had not merely predicted her, he had staged her. I opened the rider. Bellhaven House had been split months earlier into 2 structures. The residential trust, the building itself, life occupancy for Celeste, no outright sale in the first year without review. And separate from that, a management trust holding Bellhaven trade name reservation rights, guest history package materials, operational goodwill, and designated house contents essential to running the inn. Income beneficiary and managerial successor me. I read the pages twice. Without the guest ledgers, room keyboards, library maps, signature tea service, package binders, and operational identity, Bellhaven was not an inn. It was just a large old coastal house with carrying costs and weather damage. Celeste could live in it. She could not dismantle what made it earn. That was why she had taken the office keys. That was why the heartbeat box disappeared first. That was why the private preview included room keys, service silver, and front desk material. She was not selling clutter. She was trying to kill the business before anyone could prove it was alive. I put everything back exactly as I found it, except for one photocopied packet I slipped into my bag. Then I went downstairs in time to hear one of the dealers ask whether the room keyboards were included in the first lot grouping. Celeste smiled and said, "We are still evaluating what serves the property best." I spoke before I could overthink it. "Those are operational assets," I said. "Not decor." The room turned toward me. One dealer, a narrow woman with dark-framed glasses, lifted a brow. "Operational for what?" "For Bellhaven," I said. "The house still has active winter obligations." Celeste moved fast. "No, it does not," she said. "Harold closed the inn before the last hospital stay." There it was, the lie she needed everyone to believe. Not just that the house was quiet, that it was dead. I gave the dealers an apologetic smile. "I am sorry," I said. "I think there may be unresolved estate classifications here." That ended the preview almost immediately. Nothing empties a room faster than the promise of legal fog. The moment the last car left the drive, Celeste cornered me in the breakfast room. "What exactly are you doing?" she hissed. "Breathing," I said. "You should try it. Do not be theatrical. This property is bleeding money." "Then why are you selling room keys before the obituary is in the paper?" Her expression changed. "Not guilt. Calculation. Useful. Because guilt still hopes to explain. Calculation only protects. You always mistake attachment for entitlement," she said. "And you always mistake widowhood for ownership," I said. Owen walked in carrying a banker's box and stopped dead when he saw us both. "What is in the box?" I said. He tightened his grip. "Old reservation stuff." "Show me." Celeste stepped in front of him, so quickly it almost looked maternal. That is none of your concern. Wrong answer. If it really had been useless paperwork, she would have wanted me bored, not blocked. I did not push further. Not there. Instead, I picked up my coat and left. Not the house. Just the room. I drove straight into town and parked outside Harriet Sloane's office 10 minutes before closing. Harriet was 72, wore silver bangs cut with military precision, and had the dry stillness of a woman who had watched inheritance turn elegant people feral for longer than most of them had been alive. When I put the photocopied writer and my grandfather's letter on her desk, she did not look surprised. He said you would wait until she showed her hand, Harriet said. I sat down. She already started. Of course she did, Harriet said. Harriet opened her cabinet and took out a second folder. Your grandfather instructed me to hold this until either 1 year passed peacefully or Celeste attempted to market the property, liquidate operational contents, or interfere with live reservation records. Based on what you have described, we are well past all three. Inside the folder was a trustee notice preserving Bellhaven operating rights under the management trust, plus a demand for suspension of any sale involving operational assets. Archives, guest history, package materials, serviceware, tied to inn, branding room key systems, library map displays, and the grandfather clock. Even the clock, I said. He wanted visible proof, Harriet said. He knew what she would touch first. That sounded exactly like him. Visible proof. Not hidden jewels. Not secret offshore accounts. Just obvious objects reclassified, so that the moment she tagged them for sale, she would expose herself. Harriet filed 3 notices the next morning. A preservation notice for Bellhaven trade operations, a warning to the local realtor Celeste had contacted about redevelopment valuation, and a demand for immediate supervised inventory of all records and contents linked to hospitality function. Celeste called me 14 times before noon. I answered the 15th. What have you done? She said. Nothing, I said. The paperwork was already there. You are sabotaging my home. No, I am stopping you from auctioning my business out of your hallway. It is not your business. That was when I knew she still did not understand the split. Good. Because misunderstanding is expensive when it meets witnesses. She demanded a meeting the next afternoon at Bellhaven with Harriet, a valuation consultant, the realtor, and everyone with standing. Perfect. When I arrived, the blue tea tins were gone from the upstairs pantry. That made me smile. Not because they mattered, because it meant Celeste had finally followed the breadcrumb my grandfather left in his text. Too late. By then the file was already on the table. The meeting took place in the dining room. Celeste stood at the mantel in cream, wool, and pearls. Owen sat near the sideboard looking like he had not slept. The realtor, Mr. Dane, had glossy property sheets laid out beside a measuring tape. Harriet sat at the head with her folder closed. She began without ceremony. Mrs. Bellhaven, before any marketing or contents liquidation continues, everyone here needs clarity. The residential trust grants you occupancy. It does not grant unilateral authority over Bellhaven trade operation, guest records, room systems, branded service objects, or operational goodwill. Celeste smiled tightly. There is no trade operation. Harold closed the inn. I opened the heartbeat ledger and set it on the table. Wrong, I said. Winter bookings were active. Gift certificates were outstanding. Package reservations were still live. The inn was operating when he died. Mr. Dane frowned. Gift certificate liabilities. Yes, I said. Also reservation obligations and vendor commitments under the Bellhaven name. The valuation consultant, a practical woman named Rena, looked at Harriet. Are you saying the inn and the house are separated? Harriet nodded once. Deliberately. That was the first crack. Celeste tried another angle. Even if that were true, the contents are part of the home. Harriet opened her folder. Not these contents. She began reading from the schedule. Guest room keyboards, front desk ledgers, archival guest books, service silver associated with Bellhaven dining packages, library map collection displayed as identity assets, signature tea service sets, recipe binders, the foyer grandfather clock. Celeste actually laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. The clock. Yes, Harriet said. Visible markers of operating goodwill. I slid a printed copy of the private preview invitation across the table. Marta had forwarded it to me the night before. Private contents sale, family only. The highlighted lots included silver service room keys, front desk materials, library maps. Rena looked from the invitation to the schedule, and then to Celeste. That is direct interference with operational assets, she said. Mr. Dane closed his property sheets. Then I cannot value this as a clean redevelopment opportunity, he said. Not with occupancy restrictions, a live management trust, unresolved gift liabilities, and preserved trade assets. There it was. No screaming. No dramatic confession. Just a line of doors closing one after another in the room Celeste thought she controlled. She turned to Owen. Say something. He looked down at the banker's box beside his chair. What is in the box? I asked again. His voice cracked. The heartbeat books. And the holiday guest letters. Celeste had hidden them in his room, probably thinking she could starve the Inn of History long enough to sell the shell. I held his eyes for 1 second and he slid the box toward Harriet. Fear makes loyalty temporary. Harriet opened the box, checked the ledgers, and nodded once. Thank you, Owen. Celeste went pale then, not movie pale. Mouth first. The kind that starts when someone realizes the room is no longer arranged around them. You did this, she whispered to me. No, I said. He did. My grandfather had known exactly what she would reach for first. The paper, the symbols, the objects that made Bellhaven feel alive. He left her the bedrooms, the widow title, the ocean view, the chance to move through the house like it was still orbiting her. And he left me the thing she would never value correctly until it was too late. Structure. The meeting ended in fragments. Mr. Dane withdrew from valuation. Rena documented the interference. Harriet scheduled immediate transfer of booking control and operational stewardship. Owen carried the banker's box to the office and did not come back. Celeste stayed by the mantel holding her necklace like it was the only thing still answering to her. I remained only long enough to put the heartbeat ledger back on the front desk stand where it belonged. Bellhaven reopened quietly 6 weeks later. Not all 12 rooms. 4 at first. Weekend tea service. Winter storm packages. Library hours by reservation. Marta came back to the kitchen full-time. I hired a graduate student from Corvallis to help digitize the guest history. Harriet made me label every trust-governed object like we were preparing for war. Maybe we were. Celeste remained in the third-floor residential suite under the occupancy terms. I preferred it that way. Consequences feel heavier when they echo through the same halls. She could still look out at the sea. She just could not sell the story underneath it. The first weekend we reopened, a returning guest from Seattle touched the brass bell on the desk and said she was so relieved Bellhaven had not become one more gutted coastal property with expensive paint and no memory. Neither was I. That winter, the storms came hard enough to shake the widow walk rails. Guests sat in the library with tea trays while rain silvered the windows. The grandfather clock ticked in the foyer exactly as it always had. The map stayed on the west wall. The tea service remained complete. The room keys hung where they belonged. Bellhaven did not survive because I won an argument. It survived because my grandfather knew what the argument would be. He knew Celeste would move too early. He knew she would target objects before understanding categories. He knew Owen would carry boxes he did not understand. He knew I would notice the missing heartbeat ledger, read the winter bookings file, and understand why the tea tins mattered. That was the real inheritance. Not the cedar walls. Not the widow walk. Not even the income. The sequence. The understanding that sometimes you do not stop a greedy person the second they move. Sometimes you let them keep reaching until the shape of what they fear is obvious enough to trap them in front of witnesses. Celeste thought the sale sign made the story simple. Widow. Old house. Carrying costs. Practical decisions. Emotional step-granddaughter from Portland making noise. She almost got away with it. If my grandfather had not split occupancy from operation, if Harriet had not held the notices, if the ledgers had disappeared longer, Bellhaven might already have been halfway into some tasteful renovation with no room keys and no memory. But she moved before the tea tins. That was her mistake. And my grandfather, in his maddening, quiet way, had built the whole trap around that kind of impatience. By spring, the hydrangeas were blooming again where the sale sign once leaned. I burned the sign in the fire pit behind the kitchen after Marta made me promise not to keep it for symbolic reasons. She said ghosts do not need props. She was right. The house did not feel haunted anymore, just defended. One evening after the last guests had gone upstairs with their books and tea trays, I stood alone at the front desk and opened the heartbeat ledger to a fresh page. New names. New handwriting. New dates. Bellhaven House. Still alive. Still mine. In every way that mattered. Upstairs, Celeste crossed the hall in her soft, expensive slippers and paused by the banister listening to the clock, the sea, and the low murmur of guests in the library. A woman living inside a story she no longer controlled. I turned the page and kept writing. That was enough.